good. Okay. So we're doing all that. All right. Sorry for the banging, but no one will be able to hear if we all aren't quiet. So thank you very much and welcome. It looks like everyone has a seat. Do we need more seats? Okay. Good afternoon. My name is Ingrid Alverde. I'm the Director of Economic Development and Open Government with the City of Petaluma, and I'm here to help facilitate our meeting today. I'm joined here by several city staff. We'll introduce them one by one so you know who's here. And just a quick overview, as I mentioned, there will be time for anyone here who wishes to speak, as well as anyone who's joining us online. For that reason, and because there's many of you, we will have to run this meeting in a more formal manner than sometimes we do for types of workshops. Gotcha. Is this better? Is this better? If you can't hear me, will you raise your hand? Okay, thank you. I'll repeat, there'll be time for everyone to speak. Today, we're here to share what we know about mobile home park rent control regulations, to share with you what some options the city has as a government entity, and to listen to your thoughts and concerns and ideas about how the city might change its current regulations with regards to mobile home rent, space rent stabilization. I'm going to hand it over to our city attorney, Dylan Brady, who's going to walk you through a short presentation, and then we will open it up to speakers. If you'd like to speak, please fill out a speaker card, hand it to the woman in the yellow shirt. Her name is Erin. And we will give each of you up to 3 minutes to speak. And then we'll also provide time for those in our virtual audience to speak as well. Just a reminder, and you'll hear this from the other staff that are going to speak today. We're here to listen, to gather feedback that we will then share with our city council at a workshop that is scheduled on June 5th. We as staff are not here making any decisions. We haven't made any decisions. We're not preparing recommendations. Our plan is to hear from each of you who wishes to speak and share, and to share that with our city council on June 5th. You'll also be invited and welcome to attend that council meeting, and we will be seeking direction from our city council on what our next steps will be. So I know there have been some challenges and there are a lot of concerns, and we hear you. We're here to hear you and to share those concerns with our city council. So I hope that's clear. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Dylan. If you'll introduce, I think we should just do a quick round robin on introductions because we have several staff here. Karen, you want to start?
Here, Karen, you want this?
Oh. Thank you. Good evening, Karen Shmizu, Housing Manager with the City of Petaluma. Thank you everyone for being here this evening.
And then Eric, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks. And I'll have some preliminary remarks before Dylan gets going. I'm Eric Danley, Petaluma City Attorney. I'm glad everyone's here tonight. Good to see you.
Eric is behind me, hiding. He's not hiding. He's in his normal chair. It's a little bit of a different format. Ladies,
Hi, I'm Erin, the woman in the yellow shirt. I helped Ingrid with communications and worked on the door hanger that made sure that you all arrived here. So thanks for coming. Hi, I'm Sarah Wolf. I'm a housing specialist here at the city, and I am in the striped shirt.
last but not least, Nancy Sands, our fearless moderator.
Hi, everyone. And I wanted to let you know, Ingrid, that we have 49 people who are attending virtually.
Welcome to our virtual attendees. Thank you for joining us. It was very important we met with a small group of stakeholders that were representing you all, and it was very important to them that we did a virtual meeting and an in-person meeting. So we're really excited that we have the technology, and Alec is our technician with our technology. And thank you very much for allowing us to have this meeting with the support of the technology that we need. And the last thing before I start, there is a restroom just back in the hallway. And with that, I am going to hand over the mic to Eric Danley, our city attorney. He'll kick us off. Eric, you're on.
Thanks. Thanks. I'll come up here so I won't be hiding in the back. Can everyone hear me okay? Great. My colleague Dylan Brady, who's Assistant City Attorney in the City Attorney's Office, is going to take us through the slide presentation. Before he does, I'm going to encroach a little bit onto it to talk about why we're here. We're here because the City Council has identified as one of its legislative priorities revisiting our mobile home rent control regulations in the city of Petaluma. And we've been working on that, reviewing our current regulations, researching changes that have been made in other neighboring jurisdictions, and changes that the council may wish to consider regarding our own regulations. So we're going to Dylan's going to walk us through in his slide presentation what our current regulations provide and what are some changes that other jurisdictions have implemented and that our council may consider implementing to our regulations. So Dylan, do you want to take it away? Thank you. Thanks for being here. Okay.
Hi, everyone. Dylan Brady, Assistant City Attorney. I was also reminded by Karen Shimizu, our housing manager, that we have some resources on the table right outside the City Council chamber. So please avail yourselves to that. So we will go over these presentation, and it's pretty quick, hopefully 5-10 minutes, about 10 slides, because like Ingrid said, the real reason we're here is to hear from all of you, to take the feedback suggestions to City Council so they can make an informed decision for the community. So Ingrid, do you want to go to the next slide, please? Okay, and like this was kind of the agenda for the presentation, why we're here, what the ordinance currently is, what the next steps are, and then the main reason to hear from you about questions and feedback you may have. So next slide, please, Ingrid.
Before you continue,
Yeah.
Dylan, there's kind of for all of our staff and for our speakers, there's a little bit of a sweet spot here with the microphones. If you get too close, it can get a little scratchy. If you're far away, we can't hear you.
Okay.
So just to keep that in mind. And then for everyone, we all have different abilities. So if we can just remind everyone to speak slowly and clearly, that will help everyone be able to understand what is being said. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, so like the city attorney, Eric Danley, said, back in May 2022, City Council created a top 10 goals and priorities. And as part of that, it was to strengthen our tenant protections. We just got that done for structures and other units, and now we are addressing mobile homes. This ordinance, which is chapter 6.50 of the Petaluma Municipal Code. Is that okay? Better? Okay, great. Thank you. It was enacted in 1994, and there haven't been any subsequent amendments. So it is in need of some refreshing and sprucing up. So that's also why we're here to amend the ordinance. Santa Rosa and Windsor also recently amended their ordinance, and to kind of match and be similar with other jurisdictions in the county. That's the reason we are here today to amend our ordinance. And like I said, we're here to hear from you to provide that to city council so they can do the best ordinance and informed decision. So next slide, please, Ingrid. Okay, so like I said, Chapter 6.50, the Petaluma Municipal Code, that is our current mobile home rent stabilization ordinances. Petaluma is in about, I think there's about 120 or so other jurisdictions in California that have similar ordinances that stabilize and set bars and caps for what the annual rent control can be. So our ordinance has about 5 things, broad topics. One is the annual rent. We'll go over that. Fair rate of return, that is the constitutional standard that the property owners are required to have in their, for their rents. They're required to make a fair rate of return. If they don't believe the annual rent is making a fair rate of return, they can seek arbitration. And our ordinance discusses what the arbitration procedures look like, and we'll go into that in a little bit. Then there's vacancy control. That is when the mobile home space has a lawful vacant space under, as defined under our ordinance, what the property owner can charge for their new base rent. And then there's some noticing requirements. So next slide, please, Ingrid. Okay, so affected tenants, that's a defined term in our ordinance. I like to say they are the protected tenants. So those are the ones that reside in mobile homes with leases that are no greater than 12 months. So typically a month-to-month lease. And there is the new Assembly Bill 2782 that is getting rid of the exemption for those short-term or for those long-term leases. RVs are protected. And then there are commercial coaches that reside over 9 months are also protected under the ordinance. So next slide, please. Okay, so the annual rent, I like to think of it base rent. That is a defined term in our ordinance. That is the rent at the start of the tenancy. Every year it may go up either 100% of the CPI or 6% of whatever the previous base rent year was. That's the annual rent increase right now. And the next slide we'll talk about, not now, sorry, but the next slide we'll talk about what the neighboring jurisdictions, their current annual rent is, caps are. The annual rent cap can only be increased once every 12 months. And before the rent takes effect, you need 90 days notice. So next slide.
Does everyone know what CPI means? Can you define that? Can you, Consumer Price Index, which is the amount determined of inflation.
Yeah, by the federal government. Is that right, Ingrid? Yeah.
Yes, it's defined in different areas.
Yes, and ours is the Oakland Bay Area CPI. So that is what our 100% of the CPI. And I believe we have a slide here that shows what the CPIs have been in the last 22 years that are applicable to this. So next slide, please. So this might be hard to see, but these are the annual rent increases for the neighboring jurisdictions. It includes Santa Rosa and Windsor's, which were recently amended back in December. So that is, ours is 6%, 100% of CPI. So that's what the neighboring one is. And we have heard a lot from tenants. We've received notices about lowering that, and that will definitely be something that we will suggest to council. So next slide, please. And I should say too, anybody that wants to see this presentation, please let us know. We have an email address at the end of the presentation. That's also how to provide future comments to us, or if you have questions. And if you have questions or want this presentation, please let us know and we can provide that.
Dylan, we're actually going to go ahead and post this presentation to the city website either today or tomorrow. So it'll be available.
Even better. Yeah.
cityofpetaluma.org/mobile homes.
And I should say too, we've had already 2 presentations. One was to some park tenants, some are to park owners, and this is the same presentation that we have provided to both of them. So for those that have already been through this presentation, I apologize. And it's probably gonna be the presentation we do for the city council workshop too, I'd imagine. So for the park owners that believe the 6% or the 100% CPI, whichever is less, is not enough for them to make a fair rate of reasonable return, they can increase the rent. If the rent is increased by more than 300% of the CPI, then under our ordinance, there's automatically an arbitration hearing to determine whether or not the rent should be increased above the CPI. If it is below the 300%, but greater than the 6% or 100% CPI, then all of the tenants that have the rent increase, or not all of the tenants, 51% of those tenants need to petition the housing manager to have an arbitration within 21 days of the notice. So, and there are special notice, if you do rent increases under our ordinance, that provides, here are the other units that are getting the increase of rent so that the tenants can petition. Okay, so the arbitration, we have an arbitrator. He is he or she is qualified under our ordinance. They're most likely past judges, or that they have experience with mobile home arbitrations and being able to read financial data. They are a neutral third party. They are the ones that both the tenants and the property owners provide evidence to. They are the judges in this, and they set the rules for what the arbitration hearing looks like. And for arbitration, the burden of the proof under our ordinance, it's on the park owners to show that this rent increase is reasonable. Okay, so next slide, please, Ingrid. So the arbitrator, when he or she determines what is a fair rate of return, under our ordinance, it gives a list, and this is not an exhaustive list of factors to consider. And here are a couple of the ones. A main one I would want to say that other jurisdictions use is that net operating income. It's the second to last one. It's in orange. That is another way for arbitrators and other jurisdictions to determine what is a fair rate of return. So really, I think it's any evidence that the arbitrator believes is admissible to prove your case can be admissible and be heard. So next slide, please, Ingrid. So we talked a little bit about vacancy control. This is when you have a lawful space vacancy under the ordinance. There's two ways to have it. It's either the tenant voluntarily removes the mobile home from the space, or there's a termination of the tenancy as defined in the civil code. So when either of those two things happen, then you have a lawful space vacancy and the park owner is able to charge a new base rent. So currently under our ordinance, we don't have vacancy control. So if a space becomes vacant, then the park owner is able to charge a new base rent. And the next slide, Ingrid, please, I believe shows what the other neighboring jurisdictions have. So this is what the neighboring jurisdictions vacancy control. We've already heard from park tenants that this is something that we want council to take a look at and potentially amend. So maybe let's just keep it here for a couple more seconds, Ingrid, if that's okay. Okay, I'm gonna give it 10. Okay, I think we're good. And then our ordinance does require special noticing, especially for those tenants, the new tenants to be as they're defined in our ordinance. They are required to have notice that says that they can be protected under the ordinance by having a short-term lease that's less than 12 months. But with the AB 2782, that no longer has the long-term lease exemption, this noticing might not be really applicable anymore. And that's something we'll probably need to address just with the change in the state law. Okay, next slide, maybe, Ingrid. Okay, and then there's a couple other provisions, miscellaneous. One is a landlord is not able to retaliate for a tenant exercising their rights under the ordinance. I don't include it here, but I think it's a good one to know. If you have questions, tenant, park owner, under the ordinance specifically says you can call Karen Shimizu, and she'll answer your questions about interpretations of the ordinance. So that's good. We do, yes. Karen Shimizu, our housing manager. Yeah. Karen, do you have your number? Do you want to provide it now or?
That number is available on our website at cityofpetaluma.org/mobile homes.
And I should say too, for the tenant noticing slide, I should say, we just did our tenant protection ordinance. And as part of that ordinance, the city is required to provide the landlords special notices that give the tenants what their list of the rights are under the ordinance. So I think that's probably something that we are going to look into as well. So it's a form that the city creates, provides to the landlords to give to the tenants. And under the tenant protection ordinance, that's required for any new lease or if for any rent increase. So that is a suggestion that we are heard. The next steps will be a city council workshop. At this workshop, the city council will hear from staff. They'll read the staff report. They'll hear from the public and all of you about potential amendments. We will get direction then from city council to create and amend our ordinance. That will be our introduction of ordinance. It is currently scheduled for June 19th. Both the workshop, the introduction, all of city council meetings are hybrid. So that means Zoom or in person. We have been doing translations, maybe Ingrid for that?
We're doing translation upon request.
Okay, great. So June 5th is the workshop. You're all invited to that. June 19th is the introduction. And then there will likely be a second reading a few weeks after that. The ordinance typically takes effect 30 days after a second reading. So next slide. So this is the email address that we created to answer any questions, to be on our mailing list for any new updates. So please use that email address. And if you have any questions, let us know. Or comments too. If you have comments that you want city council to know, email that. We will provide those to the city clerk and they will post online. It is mobilehomes@cityofpetaluma.org, all one word. So MOBILEHOMES, the @ symbol, CITYOFPETALUMA.org. And again, we will post this presentation so you all be able to have it. So next slide, Ingrid. And then here's a list of the resources that we want to provide to the tenants if they have any questions. So that is the end of my presentation. And I think now I will pass it over to Nancy. Is it you or Ingrid or?
I'm going to go ahead and step in. I want to say that on the table in the back, we have more information for those of you who may or may not want to avail yourself of any of the supportive services that are mentioned here, but they're written down. You can take those with you. Okay, so now we are going to jump into the second part of our meeting, which is hearing from each of you. I have the speaker cards here. So we'll start with those of you that are here in the room. I'll call each of you up and then you will have up to 3 minutes to share your thoughts, concerns, ideas for staff. We'll be listening and taking notes. This meeting is being recorded. And then once we've completed the speakers that are here in the room, we will then ask speakers who are joining us virtually to raise their hands virtually and participate through our audio system. So I'm going to read the names of the first 3 people so that you know the order that you're coming up. The first person I have is Daryl Pike, followed by Vanessa Malchi and Rorg Bulzer. So Daryl, do you want to come up and speak? Are you here, Daryl? Okay, I'm going to go to the next person, Vanessa Marchi. Come on up, Vanessa, and then Rory, if you're here, you'll be next.
So anyway.
I want to remind each of you that you do have 3 minutes. That way we all get a turn. If you have anything you'd like to share with us, that you can share here, that's fine. And if not, you're welcome to email any documents you'd like to share to the email we shared before, which we can also leave on the screen.
Hi, I was just curious about our protection in terms of, I'm from the cottages of Petaluma, and they have passed out, giving us till June 1, that if you sign this and say that you don't agree with any of the changes that should be made by Bill Feeney had this typed up after a meeting, that basically he knew in 2020 that this bill was passed, that in 25 we would be in this situation. And he never honestly provided that information to anybody until current right now. Okay, so he had people last year in January all signing up for extended 10-year leases, knowing that this was coming up. Okay, and so my question is now, he's offering people that if they will sign that they're against all of this and the Petaluma rent control, that he will afford them by June 1 of this year to change things to 5% of the actual to 5-year lease. And it would also provide, instead of the 4 to 8% that he charges, it would go down to 3 to 6%. And also upon basically my concern is that I don't think that's really fair. First off, there's a lot of things that we have to look at. It should have been presented to people a long time ago. And my feeling is that what do we do? I mean, how do we know what the CPI index is going to be with the new rent control? How do we know what we should select by June 1, which is next week? And what's really fair to people? I mean, is it fair to hold this over people's heads? Otherwise, they'll be stuck on a 10-year lease. Plus the fact he says that they're completely void. I understand this lease situation is only void in the finance area, but the other areas of like the 39 pages of a lease that he provides to people with all types of confusing situations that arise within it. I mean, what's fair? You know, why have we not been all told about this back from, he knew in 2020, he knew when he had these people sign up for 10-year leases last year in January. So that's my concern. Also, my concern is if you're on rent control and it so happens that you're on month to month, is that easy for him to get rid of you?
So that's a lot of questions, and what we can't do today is give you legal advice. We can't do it any day because we're the city's legal advisors and don't represent private parties, but we can give some general answers and we can refer you to resources. So
I know, but if he wants a decision by June 1, I mean, that's absurd. I mean, today already you're talking about meetings on the June 5 and June 19 that we can get involved in so that we can understand better our options.
right. So we're engaged in a process now that we've sort of given you a high level summary of in response to the council's direction to give them some options for potential amendments to the city's mobile home rent control regulations. And as you saw, those are probably not going to take effect, whatever they are, until, what's the second reading, Dylan? Roughly?
Of June
Yeah, so probably like
17.
mid-July, sometime mid to later July. So what that means is members of the public are not going to know what those changes might even be because the council hasn't decided yet and they haven't deliberated on what they might be yet. In terms of AB 2782, which we've looked at, basically it provides that it provides that the exemption that has existed in the law historically for long-term leases ceases to apply effective February 13, 2020. So, And it also provides that the whole section in which that regulation used to exist, exempting from local rent control regulations, long-term leases, is going to expire January 1, 2025. But already the long-term lease exemption doesn't apply to leases entered after February 13, 2020. So what I would suggest is that, I mean, that's what the statute says. I'm looking at it right now. And there are resources available to folks to help them consider their immediate circumstances and what's in their best interests. You can't be required to enter in, new tenants can't be required to enter into long-term leases. You have a right to consider rent control, a lease, and also the new leases won't be subject to the exemption for long-term leases anyway, after that date at least, that's in the statute. So there are resources that can assist you and that are in the presentation and will be on the webpage, like Petaluma People Services, like Legal Aid, and others that can help you consider your immediate circumstances and what's best for you. Are in the Petaluma regulations currently, and I anticipate going forward, park owners will be required to give tenants notice of their options. As Dylan mentioned, currently in our tenant protections regulations that do not apply to mobile homes, currently they provide that landlords are required to transmit to their tenants the city's published summary of their rights, which we make available on the webpage. So one of the things that I'm sure the council will consider is whether we should do the same thing with respect to mobile home rent control regulations and make that city produced summary of rights available on the city website and require landlords to make that available to their tenants. So you asked a lot of questions, and it's understandable that you would want answers to those. And there are some resources that can assist you with that. And I just provided a summary of at least what the state law does with respect to eliminating the exemption from local rent control regulations that used to exist for leases entered prior for long-term leases, longer than 12-month leases entered prior to February 13, 2020. So I don't believe this council and the city will have the option of, I mean, the city would have the option of not having or eliminating its mobile home rent control regulations. I don't anticipate that happening. But otherwise, the state law is the state law. So that's not something that we can change locally. We're preempted from doing that when it's not what's called a municipal affair and is considered a statewide concern. So that's my, I think others may have some similar questions. So hopefully that helps you address those a little bit. If others have more specific ones, we can address them as we go. But
Thank you.
that's what I'll.
Thank you, Vanessa.
And Eric, I'll just add too, currently under our ordinance, I'm looking at the provision right now. It's section 6.50150. It precludes mobile home park owners from petitioning or allowing tenants to enter into agreements that waive their rights under this ordinance. So that's another protection that the current ordinance has that I'm sure will go forward.
So how will that get presented to Bill Fee?
What do you mean?
Well, he's the one that wants everybody to sign by June 1 that they are going to agree to the exemption on a long-term lease of rent control.
Well, so the council is going to decide what it legislates and what it doesn't legislate. It's going to decide whether it leaves the existing regulations as they are, whether it amends them. And the council may or may not take into account those signatures, but no one can require, as Dylan just said, no park owner, no one can require mobile home tenants to waive their rights under the city's regulations.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Rory, you're up next.
Hello, my name is Rory Bolzer. I am a relatively new tenant at Youngstown. Well, I'm either too close or too far away, depending on it's a no-win situation. I see the whole situation as being a vast majority of the people who live in the, definitely in the senior parks, are on fixed incomes. And so where do they get their increase from? Social Security. Well, okay, this last year we had a good increase because the inflation rate was actually off the frigging wall. Now, going back years, what has the inflation rate been? What's the cost? I mean, we were all getting 3% loans. Now it's up 7-something%. But if you have a 6% increase in rent, and that entire and your social security goes up 6%, okay, that means the entire increase of social security has gone to rent. What about food? What about gasoline? What about electricity? All the other insurance, all the other expenses that we have that also go up. So you can't have a situation, it doesn't seem feasible or reasonable to me to have a situation where we have the entire increase that people are getting on fixed income, the entire increase is going to where their housing costs versus all the other costs that they have. And if it ends up being that their housing costs are significantly greater, what's it going to do? You're going to end up having those people they'll be out on the street with the rest of the homeless. And Petaluma would be dealing with a larger population of unhomed people because they can't afford it anymore. They can't just go, the people who are on fixed incomes can't just go, oh, I'll just go have more money. Okay, where's that coming from? They don't have those resources. So there's got to be some type of balance between what the people are having to pay for their rent and what the park owners can charge. In our case, the park owners bought the park, and I think they were expecting to make a killing because this is happening all over the country of people, these groups getting together and buying parks and jacking up the rents. Yes, they may be trying to do some improvements, but they're trying to make big money off of it versus reasonable money. And I'm not sure where numbers come in for what a reasonable rate of return is, but it's possible maybe they were expecting way more than what they're going to end up getting. As a very small note, I think that the current regulation was they could increase the rent every 12 months. Well, is it 12 months from when, like if in my case, they're going to try and increase the rent from whenever they did the rest of the 12 months, not from the 12 months of my residency.
Thank you,
Don't even
Rory.
have that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Please withhold clapping and responses. It just makes it hard for speakers. Thank you so much. Our next speaker is Chris Parker, followed by Tim Petraeus. So Chris, would you like to come on up?
My name is Chris Parker. I'm a relatively recent transplant to Petaluma. Bought a mobile home in the Youngstown Park about 5 years ago. I would like to just briefly reconsider the reasons why the original stabilization ordinance was put into effect about 30 years ago. Quick recap. From a report done in 1993, apparently a majority of the residents that responded to this report reported to be low income. About more than 50% of the respondents pay more than 30% of their income for housing expenses, space rent, mortgages, utilities, property taxes, registration fees, et cetera, et cetera. About 40% of the respondents reported paying more than a third of their income for housing expenses. Every reason for enacting the rent stabilization ordinance 30 years ago is a reason for updating it today. I'd like to add two other reasons. It's already been mentioned, inflation. I think it's a reasonable assumption that the increase in inflation we've seen recently will continue for at least the next 5 years, probably more like 10. And of course, it has been mentioned before that increases, the hardest hit people are people on fixed income, because what goes up most rapidly is food, fuel, that sort of thing. The other reason the ordinance needs to be updated is what I like to call the recapitalization of the entire mobile home real estate situation. It's a national phenomenon. Large corporations have been buying up mobile home parks, usually from small owners. So now we're looking at large corporations whose investors are going to put a lot of pressure to increase prices, to increase rents. You're going to see this going forward, simply because large corporations have greater influence. So to ensure that Petaluma has anything resembling affordable housing, this ordinance has to be updated. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next speaker is Tim Porteous, sorry. Following Tim will be Betty Hotzenrader.
Hello, my name is Tim Porteous. I am a resident at Youngstown. I have been there in August, 4 years. The amount of rent that I pay is over $1,000. I have permission to, within 2 feet of the outside walls of my trailer, that 2 feet, I can put anything I want after I get permission. I have had letters for a wheelbarrow. I have a wheelbarrow. I get in trouble for my wheelbarrow. It's incredible. I can't do the work that they ask me to keep up with trees. They want me to cut the trees, but they don't want me to put the limbs in their garbage. I have to take it separate to the dump. But my issue is really the guy that bought Youngstown. If any of you will watch the arbitration that occurred, you will see that man slap Petaluma in the face, because he said, I have hunted for months for a city that does not protect its elderly, and I found Petaluma. I've been here for over 30 years. I have spent a lot of my life here. And it made me realize that in that time, I really screwed up, because I didn't take care of the elderly. And here I am now. I am an elderly, and I'm in a lot of trouble with this guy. He's just taken us over, and he says he has to make a profit. Well, we have 102 spaces. Is $102,000 a month okay profit? And we have to pay the tax assessment, which was $135,000. It's in our contracts. And in my contract, I don't know how I could have signed this, but I pay 5% plus CPI, which goes over 6% all the time. And I just saw that up there. Well, wait a minute. I pay more than that every month. Every year I go up higher than that. How can I have signed a contract that's looks to me like it was illegal to be written in the fashion that it was? How can I be stuck to that? But I am a long-term leaser. I'm stuck in this for another, well, until 25. But it's driving me crazy. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Betty Hotzenrader.
And just as a reminder on the microphones, they are adjustable. So there's adjustable top, and then you can move it closer. So please, I know it's a little tricky, but you could just try to adjust. We'd appreciate it. Thank you.
All right. Good evening, everybody. My name's Betty Hotzenrader. I'm a senior as well as a homeowner at Royal Oaks Park. Okay. I'm also a volunteer for a group, an organization that's called the Golden State Mobile Home Owners League, GSMOL. This organization exists to get legislation passed at the state level to protect residents in mobile home parks. We have already spoken to the fact that we are wanting to reduce the percentage of the increase in the CPI from 100%. We also want to reduce the cap from the current 6%. We also want to put a cap on the vacancy control. That is what you were speaking to, Rory. The lack of having that is something that keeps the rents going up every time a house turns over. If we don't fix that, if we don't get a cap on this situation, basically mobile homes will no longer be affordable for any seniors. The other one I wanted to speak to was to Vanessa. I will be providing all of the residents at the cottages some information pertaining to the fact that you do not have to sign any leases or any amendments when the landlords ask you. Once you've gained tenancy into a mobile home park, you are no longer required to sign another agreement. Thank you.
Thank you. Please hold your applause. We're losing time for others, and we have our meeting until 7. So I just want to remind you that we want to save time. Nicola Fry, followed by Judy Johnson. Thank you.
We're going to see if I work it. Not. My name is Nicola Fry, and I'm a resident of the Petaluma Estates Mobile Home Park and the past president of the Homeowners Association. I stand before you today to lend my unwavering support to the petition that I am presenting to the City Council and to anyone who will listen. This petition represents the collective voice of our Petaluma Estates community and is urging you to take decisive action on this very important matter. The over 250 signatures contained on this petition represent 98% of the residents of our community who call on you to fairly address the objectives of this ordinance by specifically adopting the following, which we feel is equitable and appropriate for all concerned. Thus, we are asking for the ordinance to read, quote, said increases shall be the lesser of 25% of the percent change of CPI or 2%, end quote. In a city built on the principles of progress and prosperity, it is imperative that we continually strive to improve the lives of all of our citizens. The petition at hand embodies the hopes, dreams, and aspirations of our fellow residents. Petaluma Estate is a 55-plus community where most of the residents live on limited incomes. The most recent space rent increase, which each of us experienced in the rise of our space rent, was the amount of 6%. It left many mobile home residents scrambling to pay for their basic life necessities. Petaluma seniors, veterans, the disabled, and families who live on limited incomes, particularly in mobile home parks, frequently have to make life-affecting monetary choices, such as having enough to eat or paying their space rent, or choosing between getting health care or making home repairs to live safely. As a board member of the Rebuilding Together Petaluma, I have personally been involved in providing services, repairs, yard work, and mobility assistance to numerous residents of many of our local mobile home parks. As recently as April this year, over 70 volunteers from the community joined to repair the homes of 12 low-income neighbors, many of whom reside in mobile home parks. From the installation of grab bars to the replacement of bathroom floors and exterior decks, to sidewalk repairs, to new front porches, the Rebuilding Together Petaluma volunteers did it all. These repairs were undertaken for those who were unable to physically do them, but mostly for those who no longer can afford to make such repairs and changes. Without the necessary repairs or yard work being accomplished, we are faced with receiving written notices and the possibility of eviction from our homes by park management. Let us seize this moment hand to hand to provide a reasonable adjustment to the Petaluma ordinance that governs. the
Thank you
mobile
very
home park.
much. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next person is Jody Johnson. I know it's hard, but when you clap, you could be isolating folks, so I appreciate it if you'd hold applause. Jody, you're next.
My name is Jody Johnson and I live in Youngstown. I came together with our city councilwoman, the vice mayor, to create a coalition of representatives to move forth Petaluma and the city of Petaluma to hear the mobile park owners, residents, to see them and to make changes so that they did not have to do away with much needed medicine, live on one Meals on Wheel meal a day divided in two to create nourishment. We actually came together for hours, and for all of those here and on Zoom, we asked for 2 to 3% cap. We asked for 25% of CPI, up to a 40% CPI. We asked for no transfer tax, and we asked that indeed the long-term leases would go away as of 2025, as we are on a long-term lease and pay over $1,200 a month. We then went out into our various parks and we mobilized, and you can see that, that we did a good job of getting it out there to people because you can see what matters to them. We need Petaluma and every city council person, including the mayor, to see that these seniors matter and they should be the utmost importance of what we're doing. We actually then, not in Youngstown, but found in other areas like the cottages, intimidation, misinterpretation of laws. We know that the owner of the cottages is suing the state of California to block the 2025 dissolution of long-term leases. As of a couple months ago, he issued that lawsuit. We intend to fight that as much as we can. And in that particular area, all the retaliation, he has been CCing me, not knowing that I don't work for the city. And I have actually seen the horrible retaliation or misdirection that he's leading all of these seniors in the cottages to think that they don't have rights and that they need to do something that will benefit him. In conclusion, none of these owners will ever supply you their P&L statements. They don't want you to know how much money they make. And that's why it never came out in arbitration. They never produced it, and why arbitration prevailed in Youngstown. So please, City Council and every one of you, make this a priority to make this happen for our seniors. We deserve that.
Thank you, Jody. Our next speaker is Lauren Williams, followed by Bill Donahue. Lauren?
I have stood before or in this space before, but it's been some years. Since then, I became retired. Money has become surprisingly scarce. And now, with the recent rise in the ground rent at Petaluma Estates, I find that 2 more years of rises like that will take all of my fairly small pension. I still have Social Security, but I don't have a great deal of Social Security. I never made much over $30,000 a year in my best years. And so I find myself in an interesting, with an interesting conundrum. For the first time in my life, I can conceive of being homeless in my very more ancient years. Now I'm 82. I retired from driving a public transit bus with Golden Gate Transit. I was strangely suited to that work. But the small pension that I got from it in a couple more years will have disappeared, or at least will disappear monthly. And that's my message.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Bill Donahue, followed by Rebecca Schneider. Bill?
Good evening. My name is Bill Donahue. I presently live at the Cottages, which formerly was Candlewood, and then Sandalwood, and then Cottages. I've been in my home since 1998, I guess now, and I've been doing a few battles for the people of Petaluma over rent control in mobile homes since about 2000. And now I'd like to say a few words with regard to the arbitration portion of the city ordinance. It needs to be looked at. Park owners have found a way to weaponize the arbitration process. As you look at the ordinance, it was supposed to be a program where the park owner sat down with the homeowner and worked out their difficulties over rents. Now it's lawyer to lawyer, dollar to dollar. They have a lot more dollars than we do. And it becomes more and more difficult to go through these arbitrations. They are isolated now to once a year. But if you have one in December and one in January, where are you going to go and where are you going to get the money to fight that arbitration? I strongly recommend that we extend the allowable period of arbitrations, possibly from 1 year to 5 years. Disallowing a park owner to browbeat the homeowner over and over again. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Rebecca Schneider, followed by Sue Sullivan.
Good evening. My name's Rebecca Schendler, and I live at the Cottages Mobile Home Park. First, I'd like to thank so many of my fellow mobile homeowners for coming tonight and being available online, because it is important to us. Now, my biggest concern is I'm here to plead with you to take into consideration not only the ordinance that's at hand, but some of the recommendations that have been made here today. I have lived at the Cottages for 4 years and 1 month. My initial rent was 30% of my income. And at this point in time, it is 41% in 4 years. Now, I've done the calculations at the average rate of Social Security increases and the average rate that this gentleman is charging me for rent. I will be at 52% of my income in 6 years. Now, my biggest concern is, where do I go? What do I do? Every single list for senior housing in the city of Petaluma, city of Santa Rosa, and most of Sonoma County is closed. Now, I would say, I guess I'll live in my car, but I don't drive. Where am I going to go? Please take this into consideration. We need your help. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Sue Sullivan, followed by Bridget Burke. Sue?
Hello to all present today. I want to thank you all for being here. And thank you to all of you for being here. Sometimes these mobile home parks act like a sovereign state, it feels like to me. Most of us here are seniors on fixed incomes. I moved into the cottages in 2021. Today, my rent space is $1,785. If this stays, so it was increased this year at the 5.7%. Thank you for that information. That was correct. About $98 this year. If this stays at 5.7% increase annually by the year 2028, my rent space will be around $2,400. That's a little high. I will move on. Please help us all to stay in the last affordable housing here in Petaluma. This is affordable. Please help us stay here. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Bridget Burke, followed by Catherine Babowski. Bridget?
My question was answered, so.
Okay, thank you. Catherine Babowski, followed by Malcolm Selby.
Yes, I live at the Littlewoods Mobile Villa Mobile Home Park in Petaluma. We got a manager that's, once a person moves out or passes away, she only rents to her family and her friends and her drug dealing friends. She doesn't rent to anybody else, which is illegal. And also too, this park is not being maintained. And this manager is not doing her job. Right now, her family has terrorized me, harassed me. They've been vandalized my mobile home. Right now, there's parked illegal against my mobile home. And this manager is not doing their job. And like I said, she retaliates people. And I did some investigation on the owners of the mobile park that operates Littlewoods. They have a long criminal history. And Mr. Donahue knows the history of Littlewoods. Do something, and these people should not be able to raise rents if they're not providing a safe environment and also maintaining the parks and have a real manager on site. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Malcolm Sibley. Malcolm, followed by Terry Briggs.
Thank you, City of Petaluma, for having this forum. And thanks to everyone that attended here in person and also everyone on Zoom. I hope there's a lot of you out there. I wanted to reiterate what Betty said about the vacancy control in-place transfers. We do have templates from Santa Rosa, Windsor, I believe Katati for in-place transfers, vacancy control. But I would say that the 10% is a really high number. I don't know how I'm in my senior years, I'm ever going to get a 10% increase on my income in anything. And certainly cable TV and utilities and those sorts of things, they don't do 2 or 3%. They go up 10%. It seems like all the time. But I'm just advocating for something lower than 10%, whatever is reasonable, 5% or nothing. But if there is a percentage that there should be a time limit, in my experience with my home, it was sold twice, once by the buyer that I bought it from. They bought it like in 2019, I purchased from them in 2020. So like in a little, right around a year, the land rent went up 20%. So there should be a time limit on that, once every so often, once every 5 years, once every 10 years. And also I believe there should be no in-house transfer fee at all if you move within the park. Because sometimes I think people buy into a park in a small space and a larger space becomes available that they can afford and they would like to move, but that 10% increase might change their mind on that. And I also think that the 10% or the in-house transfer destroys equity as it goes up. And along with the long-term leases, there are homes within mobile home parks in Santa Rosa and Petaluma that come up for sale on the market, and they're adequately, they're at market value, and they're on the market for a long time. And the prices generally are just gradually come down to a really low level. And that's because the rent in those, for those spaces is too high. So homeowner equity is also involved in that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Our next speaker is Terry Briggs, followed by Anne Marie McCaffrey Bledsoe.
Thank you for having us here today at this important meeting. My name is Terry Briggs, and I'm one of 4 owners at Capri Villa. There are a few facts that might.
They can't hear you.
Thanks. Yeah, I think so. My name is Terry Briggs, and I'm one of 4 owners at Capri Villa Mobile Home Parks. There are a few facts we thought might interest you about Capri Villa. Since 1966, 57 years at Capri, there has never been any eviction for non-payment of rent or any other issues. Since 1966, there has been 0 vacancies at Capri. Our highest rent is $739. Our lowest is $504. Our philosophy has always been to help those who have needed help on a case-to-case basis. This includes financial help at times, but also working with organizations such as the Food Distribution Program, CARE, and Rebuilding Together programs. We've helped elderly residents with our outreach without their outside maintenance at no cost to the tenant. These are just a few ways we've reached out to our community. At Capri, we have a flooding issue due to the surrounding areas on both sides being developed after Capri was established. Since 2018, on flood control alone, the park has invested $21,300 to help with flooding issues, so our tenants won't be forced to leave their homes due to flooding like they did the year of El Nino, when the entire park had to evacuate to the community center. We have a swimming pool, laundry room, trees, streets, of all of which need to be maintained on a regular basis. Just to give you an idea of some of the maintenance costs, next week, we are having a removal of a tree, which is costing $4,350. To sum it up, since 1966, we have handled all issues in our park, with the first priority being in assistance to our tenants when they have needed assistance on a case-to-case basis. We know that Capri is not the only park who have assisted their tenants when someone in their park needs assistance. Without 100% CPI and or vacancy decontrol, Capri Villas is going to have a hard time maintaining our community the way it should be maintained. This is the first time since forever that I know of that we have had a 6% increase in our CPI. Over the last 20 plus years, we've seen about 2.6%. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. Next speaker, Anne Marie McCaffrey Bledsoe, followed by Nick from Little Woods Mobile Home Villa. Anne Marie?
You just call me Anne Marie. My name's way too long.
All right, Anne Marie. Thank you.
Okay, I live in Petaluma Estates, and I come like a lot different than a lot of people here. I just moved in a couple months ago, and I'm still in my 50s. So I do think of this as my forever home. So when this first came around, like in 3 days, I'm at a community meeting hearing all this. And at first I'm like, I'm not fixing, no big deal. But as I take my aunt out, who's 96 years old, I'm like, oh, I could be here another 40 years. I better be concerned. I think the most important thing that you guys got to think of is we are not renting an apartment. We are not renting a condo or a house. We are renting a parking spot that we need to maintain. This is doing like gardening, buying flowers, and all the stuff that you have to do. So not only, that 6% increase is coming out of our money to maintain the property and to maintain the unit. If we need a plumber, an electrician, it's us who are paying it, not the landlord, like the 6% is meant to be for. The other thing that I have noticed in the short time I'm here is that no improvements get done in these places. So, you know, like we are told there's what is it, a tennis court that is not usable. We're not complaining about slumlords, though a lot of these people are. I don't even think there's a place for slumlords in this whole thing. They're just collecting the money for a parking lot. Okay, I think that's all I have to say. Did less than 2.
Thank you so much. Our next speaker is Nick from Little Woods Mobile Villa. Nick, are you still here? Nick is on his way up.
Hello, everyone. My name is Nick Ubaldi. I manage Little Woods Mobile Villa. I am here to respectfully request you not to change the mobile home rent control ordinance. I also want to be known that proposed changes to the rent ordinance would put us on the path to bankruptcy. Over the last 5 years, our costs have risen much faster than inflation. Sewer, water, PG&E, fire insurance, which has tripled in the last 4 years. These are all driving us out of business. As of today, we struggle to repair or replace our aging infrastructure because the cost exceeds our annual revenues. The current ordinance allows rents to rise at the rate of inflation, which allows us to tread water. As mentioned before, SSI was increased by more than 6% this last year so that the beneficiaries could keep up with inflation. Imagine if that increase was capped at 2 or 3%. With the proposed changes, there is no reasonable mechanism in the ordinance that allows our park to catch up on rising expenses. We need your help to stay in business if your desire is to continue to provide affordable housing to Petaluma. Park owners in this city are a part of the housing solution. Please do not use Santa Rosa as a model. These changes have caused nothing but acrimony, ill will, and incredible amounts of anger, which has pitted park owners versus the city, each looking to push one over on the other. This will not solve the long-term problem. Due to the changes in the ordinance, Santa Rosa is now geared up for legal fights and fair return hearings that are costing over $100,000 per hearing. These costs ultimately get passed along to the tenants and the city. If changes are made to this ordinance, we will do everything in our power to fight for our survival. If we are unable to continue operating within the structure, then we will need to look for a better use of our land and more housing will leave this city. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nick. That concludes the in-person speaker slips. I'm now going to hand it over to Nancy to check in with our virtual participants to see if anyone would like to speak.
Thank you, Ingrid. We have 58 attendees and we have 4 hands up at this time. If you are attending virtually, some more hands are going up. Please raise your virtual hand. I will call on you to speak and I will be using the alarm clock on my computer, which will show on the screen so that you can see the 3 minutes. And sometimes that takes me a minute to get together. So if you could just be patient with that, I'd appreciate it. Our first speaker is Heather O'Neill and followed by Margaret DiMatteo. Heather, I'm going to allow you to talk, but if you could just hold a second so I can get my my alarm clock up, that would be great. Thank you. So go ahead and unmute. And go ahead and unmute, Heather, and you can begin speaking. Okay, Heather, I'm going to come back to you in just a minute.
Can you hear me?
No, we can hear you now.
I did not raise my hand, but I would like you to know that I am in the clubhouse of Leisure Lake Village and I have a group of residents here and we're very much enjoying listening to this meeting.
Okay, thank you. You can put your hand down now or I'll put it down for you.
Thank you.
And our next speaker is Margaret DiMatteo, followed by Joel Allen Sr. Margaret, please unmute.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Thank you. My name's Margaret DiMatteo. I am the housing policy attorney with Legal Aid of Sonoma County. As a housing policy attorney, I have engaged with this community, and I'm completely in support of all of the people that showed up, all of the homeowners that showed up to share their voice and make sure it's known that they are united and they are aware of their rights and that they need your help. You know, the reason Santa Rosa and Windsor amended their ordinance is the same reason that these residents are here, is that they couldn't afford this 6% increase. I don't need to belabor the point, but most of these residents are seniors. They're on a fixed income and they are precariously housed, even though they own their home, because they rent the land that home is underneath. That is a big vulnerability and it is a big deal. And it's the reason why Petaluma has this ordinance in the first place, because they need special protections. And we're not here to vilify the park owners. It's just that there is a trend in these parks, nationwide, where corporations are taking over parks and raising the rent. We're seeing parks being changed from senior parks to all ages parks. We're seeing that in Santa Rosa in an apparent act of retaliation for them amending their ordinance. And these residents have to deal with so much just to survive and to live out the rest of their years, which is what a lot of people signed up for when they bought their home and put it into a park. So I appreciate the city for taking these efforts. I appreciate the city staff for letting people be heard. We're happy to weigh in. I support their request for the lower link to the CPI of 2% and the lower cap. I think we're going to need to reduce it. And as a park owner stated earlier tonight, this is the first year that it's actually reached near 6%. Parks have survived at this lower rate already for years and years. If you look at the years of rent increases and the CPI increase, the rents have not been increased more than 2 to 3% as majority of the years. So they can sustain and do business at that rate. And if not, they can do a fair rate of return. And I would challenge the comment from the park owner that Santa Rosa is now having $100,000 arbitration hearings as a result of their amendments. I challenge that. I think that that may not be correct. And I would encourage the city to look
Margaret.
into
Your time is
those.
And next person is Daniel Weisfeld. You may please unmute, Daniel.
Hi, I'm Daniel Weisfield. I work with the owners of Youngstown Mobile Home Park in Petaluma. Park residents want stability. They want safety. They want to feel safe in their homes, and they want to know they will not be subject to unexpected or unpredictable rent increases. Park residents want to know that the park owner will continue to maintain the park and that the park will not go out of business. I think the current ordinance does an okay job of achieving that goal. Rent increases are at CPI, capped at 6%. That's transparent and predictable. And that formula mirrors the park owner's actual expenses to operate the park. For most years over the past 20 years, the increase has been around 2% per year. Park owners have been able to survive and operate the parks at the 2% increase in years when their expenses have only risen by 2%. Now, in this recent year, we had extremely abnormal inflation because of COVID and a war in Ukraine and other global circumstances. So CPI was high. Therefore, the rent increase was high. SSI recipients' income was high, and park owners' expenses were high. All these things work together. Our PG&E expenses are way up. Our property taxes are way up. Our insurance expenses have tripled due to wildfire risk and other factors. If we can't get a fair and reasonable increase in rents, we will not be able to continue to operate our park the way that our residents know it and want it to be operated. Now, a pool, a clubhouse, a full-time on-site manager. We landscape the park. We upgrade the park. We want to create a great environment for our residents. We will not be able to do that if we don't have enough rent money coming in the door to operate the park. I think any rent increase less than 100% of CPI is on its face unfair and doesn't make sense. Expenses actually go up and park owners are actually paying those expenses, and we need rents to compensate us for those increase in expenses. Park owners have presented 2 proposals to the city: vacancy decontrol, coupled with a resident protection program to help residents who are actually in financial need. I think that is the solution and the best path forward. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Daniel. Our next speaker is Saulo Londano. And Saulo, please unmute. Oh, I'm sorry. Saulo, please unmute.
Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Hi, so my name is Saulo Londano, and I'm the regional representative for the Western Manufactured Housing Communities Association. We're an association here in California that works with park owners throughout the state to do training and education and also advocacy at the local level like this. We've been meeting with a group of park owners. Every single park in the city of Petaluma has been represented in our meetings. We have a united front of park owners who care about this community, who want to protect the residents that are in need. And as Mr. Weisfeld just mentioned, the park owners have proposed 2 very sensible solutions to any forthcoming problem in the format of a vacancy decontrol proposal, and coupled with a program to protect residents who are actually in need. This is a program that's been operated in California for over 30 years and has been taken advantage of by residents all over the state. It's one in which park owners work with a nonprofit in order to give rent credits to the residents in their parks who are in tough financial shape and need the help. And those are rent credits that never need to be paid back. This is a proposal that is fully voluntary. No park owner is forced to do this. So they're doing this out of the goodness of their heart and wanting to put their commitment on the paper to what they're willing to do to make sure that no evictions happen in the city of Petaluma. The majority, if not all of the parks in the city of Petaluma, that's been the reality for many years. There haven't been evictions for rent or any other reasons. So we are here, today to ask that the staff and the council take a look at what is being, communicated both individually as well as a group. From the park owners in the city of Petaluma. You have received letters from individual parks telling their own individual story. You have individual park owners present at the meeting today and on Zoom. These are not big corporations from across the country. These are small family businesses who will not be able to continue operating their park if they're not being given a fair return on their investments. To say that park owners have been able to operate under a lower level of CPI so that we should just force them to operate at that level obviously makes no economic sense. It's obviously in the time when inflation is high that those park owners need the protection of being able to do that. It's the same thing as saying that, well, when inflation is high, we should cap the Social Security increases of these seniors as well. Nobody in their right mind would say that. Nobody in their right mind should limit the 100% of CPI of these park owners as well. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Just as a reminder that let's all be respectful of our speakers, as I think everyone tried to be of you. Our next person on the list is Diane, and after that is Bill F. Diane, please unmute.
Hi, this is Diane Pimentel. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. I'm going to touch upon a few things that have already been mentioned, but primary is the vacancy control. I noticed Rohnert Park has a vacancy control, which is no increase. And I would propose that for the Petaluma rent stabilization ordinance as well. With regard to 2782, you've heard already that it is being challenged. Therefore, I would discourage relying on the state guidelines to I'd like it to be a duplication of what's in place right now at the state level in case that should get kicked back for any reason or be tied up in litigation. With regard to improvements, I know that improvements can be planned for. So if someone wants to look at any one profit and loss statement, it does not account for the years that have been able to be budgeted for on that particular item, whatever that improvement might be. And, you know, there are a lot of us at Petaluma Estates. We have 215 lots, 215 spaces. And that's a lot of rent that comes in on an annual basis. So, you know, when you look at expenses, it's there and it can be budgeted for, and it probably is. So I would hate to have it be a disillusionment. The next item has to do with during COVID. You know, it was difficult to get employees, to hire new people, to keep new people. So, you know, our expenses, I mean, the park maintenance went downhill a bit during that time because we didn't have full staff. And one park manager was running the show for a long while. I don't think he was getting a whole lot of extra money for that time, but there was a lot of savings going on as well. So, you know, it's a balancing act with budgeting, and I would just hope that the big picture is considered at all times. And that concludes my comments. I fully am in support of the rent stabilization ordinance to reflect a lower rent and a lower cap. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Bill F. Bill, you may unmute, please.
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. I'm Bill Feeney. I'm the owner of the cottages in Petaluma. And my analysis of this situation is it's instigated because of the high CPI this year and people that are in need. It was a imposition on them. I think the point that was made earlier by Salo is that we have a program available for people with rental assistance, and actually they end up better in the rental assistance program if they qualify than what's being proposed in the rent control ordinance, the change in the rent control ordinance. So in terms of people in true need, I think we're addressing that. And the park owners are underwriting that. Also, historically, I've owned mobile home parks in Sonoma County for 45 years. I've never come close to having an eviction for inability to pay rent, and always worked with people if they were having some sort of financial problem, plus the fact that there's a number of agencies available for people in need. Lastly, that CPI over the past 21 years for the city of Petaluma has been 2.6%. If we adopted what's being proposed here, it would be 1.8%. Back in 2002, the council fortunately did not do that. In 2002, for the next 4 years after that 6.6% increase, the average increase was less than 1.5. So I heard things about this is going to be going on for the next 5 or 10 years, and there's no basis of historical fact for that. The part about rent or vacancy control is what I think it really needs to be addressed, in the sense that we do have vacancy control where the incoming resident is able to pay what the outgoing one pays for. And we've had other ordinances that have had successfully had increase in rent to the highest of the average 3 highest in the park. That allows for more income for the residents or for the owners, and to upgrade and update the 60-year-old infrastructure of these older mobile home parks that really weren't designed to be here in today. And regarding inflation, the city has seen it with their affordable housing. They started out with $400,000 per unit, and it's now up to $800,000 per unit. So mobile home park owners certainly feel that need. And lastly, on the point of long-term leases, they're a contract between the owner of the property and the homeowner, and to exclude that, I think, is counterproductive if somebody is happy with the contract they have. Lastly, mediation would be a good idea to add rather than simple arbitration. I appreciate you letting me have the opportunity to speak to this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And our next speaker is Joel Allen Senior. Please unmute. Joel, are you there? Okay, Joel, I can't hear you. So I'm going to.
It's going to be hard for us to hear if the audience is speaking too. Thank you.
Joel, I'm going to move to Sherry Feinstein and then I'll come back to you. Sherry, please unmute.
Thank you. I'm Sherry Feinstein. I live at Youngstown Mobile Home Park, and one of the comments that Daniel Weisfield made was that the fire insurance, PG&E, water, property taxes are all skyrocketing. Well, they're skyrocketing for the residents as well. That's not something that just is to the park owners. And the problem is that most of the residents in the mobile home parks are on a fixed income, so they have nowhere else to go, whereas the park owners can just jack up our rents. I've read park owners' posts on LinkedIn where they're bragging about how much return they can get for their investors and what they have and can been doing in order to get that. Not showing the P&L at the arbitration was their choice. And I think that the fact that they did not show the P&L, which could have possibly won them the arbitration, speaks very loudly. That was all I've got. Thank you.
Thank you. And our next, let's try Joel again.
Okay, my name is Joel Allen. I live in Youngstown. And all I want to say is these people that buy these parks up, all they want to do is put elderly people out on the streets. Don't they have elderly people? We are not trying to buy their yachts, their Lexuses, their Mercedes-Benz, or pay for their rent or their houses. All we're trying to do is live. There's a lot of people in here that don't even live on Social Security. The Social Security that they get, they use for medicine. And I'm a senior as well as all those people in Youngstown and these other mobile home parks. And that manager, whoever he is, doesn't he have elderly people that live in places? That's all I want to say. You guys have a nice time. And you people that sit on these city council meetings, don't you have elderly people that live in places? Even these senior rest homes, they charge more money than these people make. And I think it's a crying shame that you want to treat elderly people like we're little dirt and little kids. Thank you. Have a nice day.
Thank you, Joel. And next is Bruce Stanton. Bruce, you may unmute now.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Bruce Stanton. I'm the corporate counsel for the Golden State Manufactured Homeowners League, GSMOL. I've been at this for a lot of years. Pretty familiar with ordinances all throughout California, of which there are about 110. And also represented residents in probably 50 to 60 administrative rent hearings all throughout California. I just wanted to make a few comments in response to a few of the statements or comments that were made tonight. Vanessa, the first speaker, said that the residents didn't know about AB 2782 and that the owner didn't tell them about it. Well, the park owner has no obligation to tell them. It's a law. It's presumed somebody would know the law or understand how to find the law. But I would just say that's why it's important for residents to organize and be members of an organization like GSMOL, because GSMOL sponsored 2782. I actually participated in its passage and all the discussions and testimony that happened. So That's why it's important to belong to something. 2782 indeed does not say that if a person re-ups or extends the agreement, that the exemption will end. So if those folks did re-up for another 10 years, they're going to remain exempt until January 1st of 2025. And we'll just have to see what happens to this litigation. I'm confident the state of California will prevail, but we will see. There was also a comment made, can month-to-month residents be evicted? No, they cannot. There's only 7 authorized reasons to evict a mobile home resident. The term, ending the term, is not one of them. If parks are being threatened with changing from senior to all age, there is something called the Senior Park Overlay District that could be enacted in a place like Santa Rosa to prevent that. Vacancy control is a critical part of ordinances. For every $100 the rent increases, resident equity decreases by $10,000. That's a paired analysis that's been accepted for years. And that's a critical part of any ordinance. And I would say that when we talk about deferral or subsidy programs, it would have to be a true subsidy and not just a rent deferral until somebody, dies or sells. And it can't be illusory. It would need to be binding. And the problem with so many of these programs is they're not binding. And the park owner can take them away anytime they wish. So I'm in favor certainly of the ordinance staying as strong as possible. And I thank you on behalf of GSMOL for your time.
Thank you, Bruce. And our next speaker is Carol Carey. Carol, you please unmute. Carol, you may unmute. There you go.
Hi, my name is Carol Carey. I live in the Cottages, and I'm one of the younger residents, so I still work. My husband works, and he's also there. So the rent increases don't really impact us as much as it does everyone else. What I don't like is the strong arm tactics that were handed down at the meeting that was held on Saturday. And just downright being disingenuous, Mr. Feeney, saying that selling our house for less would provide affordable housing to people. And that way they could pay the rent if they paid less for the house they buy. And then we received some documents in the mail yesterday. And with an affidavit that they wanted us to sign stating our opposition to any rent control ordinance. And as a result, if we did that, we would get a more favorable deal in a lease. And if we didn't, we had if we took arbitration, we were probably going to lose. This is all in the letter. Finally, the subsidy that he was stating about people who need extra help, he stated Saturday it's 10%. I mean, 10% of your rent, which for a lot of people, that's not a whole lot. We pay $17.55 base rent, so it's at $175 if it were us. So what I really don't like is their ability to strong arm more elder seniors who don't know what to do and don't think they have a voice. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. And our last speaker is Katie. Katie, you may now unmute, please.
Hi, my name is Katie Cardwell. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I just wanted to second the comment made earlier that really, I think, sums it up in a nutshell, that so many seniors and that are in mobile homes are there on a fixed income, and when the rent increase is higher than the Social Security increase, it's pretty black and white that becomes something that's not sustainable. So I just think that is a point worth really focusing on. My second comment is about vacancy control. If rent space can go up as much, if it is uncontrolled and can go up at an unlimited rate there, a owner of the mobile home does not even have the option really of going, oh, I'm going to sell this place and go somewhere else, because they're going to take such a loss on the sale of their initial home. They're not going to be able to find anything anyplace else, and more than likely we're there because in a mobile home, because income is so limited. So those were the 2 points that I just really wanted to reiterate and say seem like such focal points for me. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Katie. And that concludes our virtual speakers wanting to speak. Ingrid?
I have one additional speaker card that showed up. Carla Hickman, are you still here and would you like to speak?
Thank you. I represent Leisure Lake Village park owners, and we are a family-owned park that we've owned it since 1993. I think we have the distinction of having the lowest rents of any place in Petaluma Park and the highest number of people on rent control. We do care about our tenants, and we are trying to be reasonable with this. I just wanted to address a couple things that came up on comments that have been made that I am happy to get clarification if anybody knows. One is that, yes, we do own a parking lot, but we also own the streets and the utility lines and clubhouses. And for us, for example, the woman who mentioned budgeting, we did budget to redo our roads. We've been budgeting for over 10 years. And we budgeted that thinking that it was going to be about $350,000 at the most when we were budgeting this 5 years ago. With the gas prices that went up, that cost for us this year was over $750,000. That was not in our budget. We had no idea it would go to that. And those are the kinds of things. And now we have water lines that we need to start budgeting for, and a clubhouse remodel we need to start. But those prices have gone up so much more than what we ever expected. And that's hard for us to keep up with when on a 1% rent increase. Our pool maintenance has doubled, our tree maintenance, all these things are going up much higher than we ever expected. On the vacancy decontrol, I know the park owners have talked about this, and we have never asked for unlimited. I think the proposal that we're looking at was just the average of the three highest. Unlimited would be unreasonable. That's not what we're looking at. It's what rents are currently in the park. So that was another thing. And then I don't know the answer to this, and maybe somebody does. I don't think the rent increases have ever been above what the Social Security increases have been. So somebody mentioned that, and I think actually they've often been lower. Don't know. Yeah, sorry. That's what I'm saying. I don't know the answer to that one. I just know that a lot of the years as we were getting 1.2 CPI increases and 1.6 CPI increases, which has been a lot of the last 20 years. This is one of 2 years in 20 years where they've been over 6%. So and they were maxed at 6%, but 2 years and 20 years. And we've had a lot of years where they were 1.3, 1.8, 2.1. So and that's still
that's a big thing, but is that
I understand.
Whatever the CPI is, I can't,
Folks,
I can't remember what that stands for, but
folks, tenants.
Someone needs to be muted.
Tenants
And
that work-
everyone, we need to let everyone speak. So please let our speaker speak. Thank you.
Right, we just need to show each other courtesy so we can have a good conversation and take all the information back to the council. So please show each other respect. That'll be much appreciated. Thank you.
So you have about 30 seconds left.
That's fine. I just want to finish that we are not all big corporations, and we are not all out to try and get as much money as we can. We are in here for the long haul. We have kept this park for the long haul because we do care about the community that we're in. I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Thank you, Carla. I think that completes all our speakers. So Eric, do you want to wrap it up and talk the group through our next steps? I see some hands up. Are there other people who were choosing to speak? Did you submit a card? No? Okay. Got it. Okay, well, and ma'am?
Because we speak to facts, if I could have less than a minute to address the fiction.
There it goes. It's going to be a problem if people get to speak more than once. All this is being recorded. We've got note takers. We're going to make sure there's a solid factual record before the council. And folks are, this is going to be a public process going forward. So tenants and park owners are going to be able to return back for the council workshop. And when an ordinance is introduced and, and when it's brought up for adoption. So there's going to be plenty of input. And we could, we've still got 15 minutes so we could hear from some other speakers who have not already spoken. So do we need to take some cards out? Yeah, come on. And then we'll conclude with some remarks very quickly whenever.
And the other thing is if someone's already spoken and there were issues that were brought up that you wanted to clarify, you can also send us an email at mobilehomes@cityofpetaluma.org to clarify any issues. Ma'am? Okay.
So my name is Martin Heimowitz and I live in the cottages. I've been blessed. I lived here 9 years already. I'm thrilled. The point is, we're seniors and everybody here, we have limited income. The town, the city or whatever, Petaluma has an opportunity to show the world how they take care of seniors. And that's the bottom line here. It's got to be a low percentage of CPI or no increase at all. And as far as the owners of the park are crying, they should sell the parks because I'm sure they're not going to lose any money and the new person knows what he'd have to deal with. That's it.
Thank you so much. Please. Thank you for the decorum. Mark Firestone has also submitted a speaker's slip. Thank you so much.
Before I speak, can I give this to you? This is what was just handed out. You got copies of it? Okay, this was handed out by Bill Feeney. Okay. So my name is Mark Firestone. My wife was Carol Carey that spoke virtually, so I'm not going to speak over long about this. But basically, I was at the meeting that Bill Feeney had last Saturday, and the improvements that we were promised and also that he reiterated that he's given us are a bocce ball court, which consists of a low curb with crushed oyster shell and one set of bocce balls. He's going to be giving us a pickleball park. I thought that was pretty cute. A pool which was existing, a spa which he put in, and a gym with 3 pieces of used equipment and a weight set. Now, here's the thing. When you start talking about improvements, and then you mention things like, I'm going to give you a $319 pickleball set that you can play in the parking lot. This really doesn't go over very well. And it really doesn't justify the rent increases that he wants and that he gets. As far as that goes to, just the last thing that I want to say basically is, I'm a capitalist from way back. I aspire to be a millionaire and I probably never will be, but I had my own business. I work for somebody else currently in construction. I know the cost of things. I know the cost of maintenance. I know the cost of construction. And, I respect the fact that these people have a right to make a fair profit. And that's great. But when you bought this park, you had a responsibility to the people living there. And when you denigrate the elderly residents who live in the tin cans because you want to get rid of the tin cans, you're not winning any friends. And the last thing is, if this is something that Bill Feeney is proud of, why the hell isn't his name on it? Thanks.
I think that now officially concludes speakers. I'm going to ask Eric to wrap us up, and then anyone else, ma'am?
Hi, my name is Sean Powell. I live at Youngstown. And there were a couple of statements that just we'd like some clarification on. One was that Mr. Weisfield said that they're a mom and pop operation. They are not. He currently owns 40 properties. We paid the property tax increase and that he was speaking to was actually passed through to the long-term leaseholders. That's a fact. They want nonprofits to help us with rent subsidy. We're not asking for a handout. We're not asking for subsidy unrealistically. And it has insulted a number of seniors. Also, Mr. Feeney at his meeting on Saturday, I was there. He offered to help those people that needed assistance with their rent, at which he would, on the back end, take care of what was handed out. These are terms that are very insulting. And lastly, right now at Youngstown in particular, our pool is closed. They are currently doing improvements to it. And that is one of the rare improvements that we have seen other than speed bumps put in. I live there. I can tell you that if you drive through the park, you're not going to see many improvements over the last at least 4 years since I've lived there. So I'm asking council and the city of Petaluma, as everyone else here mostly, please take care of us, help us by passing this revision.
Thank you. And I just want to remind you that at this point, there's not a specific ordinance that's being considered. It's not a pass or don't pass. The next meeting with the council is a workshop to discuss what to pass. So I just wanted to remind you that, and I'll pass it to Eric and he can probably address that in closing thoughts as well.
Thank you, Ingrid, and thanks everyone for being here, both in chambers and in Zoom, both tenants and park owners, because the purpose of this exercise is to hear from everybody and to bring all that information before the council with staff analysis and context so they have a good basis for making their decisions about whether and in what ways to amend the current mobile home rent control regulations we have in Petaluma. So as staff have mentioned, the schedule going forward is the workshop before the council, when we're going to give a similar presentation to what we did tonight to remind everyone what the current regulations are, to compare those to neighboring jurisdictions' regulations, talk a little bit about state law, and then we'll present some choices that the council consider, suggestions that we've heard from various stakeholders about changes that they could choose to make to the city's regulations. We'll receive their direction. By the way, this follows very much the same process we just recently did for the city's tenant protection regulations that do not apply to mobile homes. So we're using the same process. So that workshop is scheduled for the 5th of June. We'll take that direction from the council, come back with amendments that they direct us to present to them so that they can introduce them on June 19th. Their opportunity to adopt those regulations would be July 10th, which if they stick to that schedule, which it's up to the council, of course, but if they do, then that would give us an effective date to those amendments of about August 10th. Okay, so that's what we're going to be looking at. Thank you again for being here, for being respectful. Keep those same approaches when you come back to the council meetings, because we're even stricter about that so that everyone feels free to speak their mind in the space. And we'll look forward to seeing you then. Take care. Bye-bye. I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
We're scheduled. Yeah.
We're meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's not a city hall.